Alright guys, it's Bad News Bears. Welcome to the channel. I have over 8,000 hours in Smite 1 and I am a pro at Predecessor, or well, as pro as one can be at the current moment. Today, we're going to break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of Smite 2. Let's jump right into it. So one thing we need to get out of the way first, obviously this was an alpha and they stressed a ton that this was like as alpha as the game can be, and it truly was. So I'm going to avoid talking about bugs or performance issues, though honestly I felt the game performed pretty well outside of some server issues, and obviously there was a ton of bugs, so we're just going to avoid that. We're gonna let that lie and assume that it'll all be good, you know, by the next alpha or by beta or whatever. Let's start off with the good, and the best thing about this, which is Smite 2 does really feel like Smite. When Smite 2 got announced, we didn't want a brand new game. We still wanted Smite to be Smite. Smite 1 had a ton of issues with being Unreal 3, a heavily modified Unreal 3 engine, as well as like using Flash for the UI. They were basically so bottlenecked, and change needed to happen. This was something I was talking about for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, that we needed Smite 2, and to my surprise it actually came. So that is the best thing about Smite 2, is that it still feels like Smite. Hi-Rez has a lot of ambition going to Smite 2, which is a great thing. I feel like Hi-Rez has always sort of been ambitious, but like we really see that with Smite 2. A lot of this we'll talk about later, whether it's for better or for worse. The item changes, the physical magical scaling, the Gold Fury changes, the buff changes, the interact key, the attempted like removal of gods being in specific roles. Hi-Rez has been so ambitious with Smite 2 already, and I hope they stay on that track, but also not get too ahead of themselves and make so much goofy stuff that they never address or anything like that. We'll see more so with like the second alpha and like going into beta. But as of the moment, the ambition is great. So we sort of already talked about this, but item shop. The item shop was a great step forward for Smite 2, bringing it more in line with other MOBAs like League of Legends and Predecessor, where you start with a tier 1, you know, power item, and that builds into every power item. You start with a tier 1 bow, that builds into every attack speed item. My issue with it right now is that there's a few issues with it right now. Tier 1 items not all being a consistent price, where your baseline attack item should cost the same as your baseline attack speed item, should be the baseline HP item, should be the baseline physical armor item. It creates more consistent back timings. I don't know if League does it this way, but Predecessor does. Creates more consistent back timings, makes the game just easier to understand while not sacrificing any complexity, really. I think it just makes more sense to do it that way. Maybe due to balancing reasons, Smite can't do that, but then you could argue just balance your game to account for that. Perhaps. Listen, you know, I'm not the guy balancing it, but it'd be a nice improvement. Also, some of the tier 2 items, I just assume the items aren't completely finished. There's some tier 2 items that'll give you like percent pen, but then when you finish the tier 3 item, you don't have any percent pen, so you just have some and then you lose it. That's super not how this build system is supposed to be. Well, typically. Address those two issues, and then we have a nice build system that is consistent with other MOBAs that we can all appreciate, and forget about the dog-awful, boring build system that is Smite 1. So another great thing that Hi-Rez has done is have characters scale differently, and what I mean by that is have like physical and magical power scaling. Looking at Chalk is a great example, where his ultimate scales off both physical and magical damage, or magical power, which means he can build both kinds of items, which is awesome. This is another standard thing, I think, in MOBAs. I'm pretty sure League of Legends does this. I know for a fact Predecessor does this. It creates a lot more diversity and a lot more to think about within a character's kit. It makes a character's kit so much more complex, while also not having to necessarily change the kit at all. Like, Chalk is very cool, and it has actually created 2 completely different playstyles for Chalk, where the magical power gives him more healing, more protections, while also still letting him hit really hard with his ultimate. Whereas when we talk about physical power, it's just giving him more damage throughout his kit in its entirety. His axe scales off of physical power, the spin scales off of physical power, and the ult scales off of physical power. It creates such a diverse way to play the game, and a different outlook on characters who in Smite 1 were so cut and dry. Chalk was such a generic, kind of boring character in Smite 1, but Smite 2, it's a total facelift just from this change alone, and it's awesome. In Smite 2, we now have an interact mechanic, which we did not have in Smite 1, so we use this to pick up buffs, start certain objectives like the Warhorn and then the gold caches. I think this is a great change. When we have the global kiting in Smite 1, this is a current issue right now, where you bring your speed and red buff together. The amount of times people have picked up the wrong buff is insane. And like, yeah, just don't be an idiot. But it happens. The interact button, you can't really mess it up. You don't do it by accident. You can do it maliciously, but you can steal buffs normally maliciously. The interact button, just overall, I think is a problem solver, not a problem creator. I've seen discussion about this. I am, for one, for it. I think the interaction with the gold cache is cool. I think the interaction with the Warhorn is cool. Overall, I think it's just a good quality of life change. To talk more about buffs, the buff leveling mechanic is awesome. Maybe there's some balancing issues with it, especially with buffs not dropping at level 1. It's super easy to like hard focus the enemy's red buff and just make them never have it, and the red buff, especially once it's level 4, is incredibly strong. I think it's maybe too easy to use invading to snowball. You know, playing in the alpha, playing only pubs, my match quality wasn't great, so maybe I just didn't see this exposed enough, but to me it seems like it's super abusable, which would be problematic, but you can just fix that with balancing. At its core, I think it's a cool mechanic, very fun. Maybe I'm in favor of having buffs drop at level 1 again. Time will tell. Again, on the train of buffs, Gold Fury rewards. So the Gold Fury rewards are kind of cool. This is something that we have in Predecessor, basically, where we have the Fangtooth giving you 3 different buffs. The idea of wanting to capture more of these and making losing them feel impactful, or like being able to, you know, weigh the odds where, yeah, maybe we can give up Gold Fury 1 or Gold Fury 2, but we definitely can't give up 3. My only thing with it is maybe we should get the, what is it called? Is it the Primal Fury? I don't remember what it's called. But the one that turns off towers maybe should be after just 3 are taken, not one team gets 3. I think that might make Gold Fury slightly more interesting, but overall, I think bringing more value to the Gold Fury and more of like a big objective feel to it is an awesome change, and permanent buffs are a great way to keep the game going forward. This is going to be a quick one, but the VGS is unchanged. The VGS is arguably the greatest thing about Smite. The ping system is so fantastic, and it's here in Smite 2 completely unchanged, and that's fucking awesome. I think the map in Smite 2 is really well done. Of the MOBAs that I've played, I think this is my favorite map, strangely. It's pretty simplistic, but it's also kind of just fun. I do have a few gripes with it, though. I'm a jungler, so none of these really affect me. I think red buff is a bit too far away from mid. I feel like going from mid to the buff back to mid takes too much time, as well as there is an alarming amount of brush or bushes or flowers or grass or whatever you want to call it. The stealth bushes, there's just far too much of it in duo lane. It's like almost half the lane is brush, and I'm not jazzed about that. I think that's really obnoxious and super weird. It's like duo lane was just like the forgotten, the brother no one cares about of this map. If it wasn't for that lane, this map would be amazing. Outside of that, like I said, outside of the duo lane, super fun map, had a blast, and I hope they kind of keep this map throughout at least the entirety of Alpha. So talking a bit more about buffs or just camps in general, the removal of Invader's Curse. Smite 1 is very boring and kind of like you just playing the same game every time for the first like 10 minutes because there's an Invader's Curse. The removal of it causes so many different starts, like a lot of different strats to be used. Maybe one day it'll become problematic again, but I feel like at that point you just have a balancing issue with the game. Address it in a different way. The removal of Invader's Curse just adds a ton of fun to the game, and I pray Invader's Curse stays far, far away from Smite 2. The last thing I want to talk about is reworks. Hi-Rez has taken some time to look at characters and rework them a bit. One thing I feel like Hi-Rez has always kind of done well, not looking at you, Persephone, as reworks, they always try their best to keep the character's design intact. Like, we reworked Anubis ult, reworked on her ults, made them more interesting while also keeping them the same. I think the changes to Ymir were great, like the wall being able to knock him up, being able to slam the ground while moving. Who else got like kind of reworked? Athena ult got reworked a bit. Not a fan of that actually. Neith got like a pretty significant kit change that also keeps the character feeling the same and also more fun. I think it was really well done. Hopefully we get a bit more in depth with the reworks in Smite 2. I think there's problematic Smite 1 characters that need to be reworked almost entirely. It's a good start. I think we're making already interesting characters more interesting. We talked about the good. Now let's break down the bad. The first thing I want to talk about is Warhorn over Totem of Ku. I think Totem of Ku was more interesting, especially in Smite 2, given that blue buff doesn't restore mana, which is also kind of another bad, is that there's no mana regen for solo lane. So Warhorn I find mildly interesting, but I think Ku is just all around better. And honestly, I think bringing back Ku the way it is in Smite 1, where you have to fight over it with damage rather than the interact button, is also more interesting. It's a slight nitpick, but I think bring back Ku. Ku's great. Everyone loves it. You know, you go to the pro scene, you lands, you know, whenever it gets taken, people go, Ku! It's awesome. Just bring Ku back, man. This might be a hot take, but the art of the game. The items look the same, so I'm not really talking about items when I discuss this, but the map, as pretty as the map looks, and I think the map looks fantastic. It's not a Smite map, visually. The map, honestly, is the one I'm less concerned about because I do think it looks really good. Though I kind of do miss that slightly more cartoony, kind of like fun style to it. It's the models, the character models. Some of the skins look so good in Smite 2. I'm talking like that Shadow Anubis skin and the Kitsune Anubis skin. Both of those look really, really good. I think the Neith skin looks really good. But like, I especially noticed this with base models. Like, they're not Smite. Maybe it's because I'm so used to the way Smite looks, but that style is kind of part of what I like about Smite. And at the moment, it feels super lost within Smite 2. And I think this is like kind of an issue with gaming in general, where a lot of things are kind of just starting to look all like the same game. This is one that I'm not really exactly sure how to talk about, because I feel like some characters just felt bad. Not like from a balance perspective, but from like a gameplay perspective. This could be because they're unfinished. But part of me also thinks this might have been client side, because I felt like Kernanos felt awful. He's a character I really liked in Smite 1, and I hated playing him in Smite 2. He just felt super jank. Meanwhile, my cousin, who was an ADC main, thought Kernanos felt amazing. So it's possible that there is some client side bug. I don't even know what about these characters felt off, but there was just something weird about them. The other character I noticed this super hard with was Odin and Chalk's auto attacks. Chalk's auto attacks were awful, and Odin in general felt awful to pilot. I'm not an Odin player, but you know, I pick up Odin in Smite 1, I'm like, yep, feels like a Smite character, and I'm playing the game. Odin in Smite 2 felt horrible. Now, my cousin, who is again the ADC main, did agree that Odin felt bad, so it is possible that like my Kernanos experience was client side or just my perspective of the game. But some characters just felt super jank. I hope it's because they're unfinished. If not, you know, maybe I just don't like Kernanos anymore. Now I'm gonna talk about the ugly. And I know I talked about bugs or like unfinished things and not really wanting to address that. But man, I know this was an alpha. But like, can we please make sure we're not blasting our players' eardrums? The audio was so bad. Holy, you use Kukulkan and God forbid you hit more than one thing and it sounds like that lead pipe meme that people will like play really loud in Discords. Oh my god, that shit is so loud. There was a couple other things that were like incredibly loud too, and I can't remember what they all were right now, but that was like the standout one. Please I know it's like surely it can't be that hard to fix the audio. Just make sure you're not blowing out my eardrums. Thanks. So I know we talked about the buff level up mechanic as a good. There is one specific thing that I want to discuss that I believe objectively is bad, which is the trinkets, which you get from leveling up the harpies. what, you can get like a 900 or something HP shield on squishies. I think that's kind of a little bit OP and abusable. I just think that is too much for, you know, any character to have, really. I just think trinkets either should be removed as a whole or severely toned down at level 4. Oh, beads in Smite 2. I really don't like beads. So active items I get are a necessary evil of MOBAs. That's just the nature of the game. I think Predecessor has done them the best way of any game. I think Smite 2 has now done them the worst. I don't actually like actives on my purchased items. I think summoner spells are better. Or again, in Predecessor, having the crest system is better. And then the free blink, on much like we have with the beads. Every role having beads, it's just like tanks having beads for free is obnoxious. I do like that there's this added skill of knowing when and where to resource dump based on your knowledge of whether or not the enemy has beads. I think that's awesome. I like that a bit more skill, but I just find it overall frustrating. But ultimately, I just don't like the free bead system. And people make the argument, it's like, well, CC is such a prominent thing in Smite. You remaking the game. This is your chance to fix that issue. This is your chance to remove the fucking mass abundance of CC that's in Smite and how long those CCs last. Now we don't need beads on everybody. I feel like this was your chance to stop the need for the beads. Take this chance. You don't have to balance every character now. Just remove the beads and push back on the CC. There is no need for this. This is just obnoxious and frustrating. Now I want to talk about jungle bosses. Jungle bosses kind of just take too long. Predecessor, I know I keep bouncing back to Predecessor, but Predecessor, I have an issue where they took the boss out of the jungle bosses. You know, most junglers can solo both objectives. It's kind of shitty. Smite 2? Man, you can't sneak an objective. It's like impossible. It takes 15 years with all 5 people there. You need like multiple picks and a decent amount of time to take these objectives. I think both Gold Fury and Fire Giant need to have a slightly smaller health pool, or not a slightly small health pool, a significantly smaller health pool. And I think Fire Giant needs to do slightly less damage. I think he does too much right now. Just like tone it back a bit. Don't take the boss out of Jungle Boss, but maybe make him possible to take. Just like a thought. So the last thing I want to talk about is that roles in Smite 2 just don't feel real. They're not like differentiated enough. Obviously every role is still played to an extent. There's been a lot of double jungle where you don't have a support. That's one thing. But these roles exist for a reason. We have other modes to get rid of these roles. This is where we have Slash, or what was Siege, and what was Clash, and Arena, and Joust, and all these other roles, or all these other modes. These are the modes where roles aren't required. The way Conquest is formatted, you do need these roles. Support is there for a reason. Jungle is there for a reason. Solo lane's there for a reason. Mid and ADC. Like, they're all there for a reason. There are 2 roles in particular that I think we need to let their roles be their roles. Support. I think right now support feels really weird and kind of unfun for both teams. I think we need a true support item so they can not touch farm but still also keep up in gold and XP. As well as I think we need an item that makes junglers junglers and other characters not junglers. We need 3 roles in this game: support, jungle, and the other guys. Those are the 3 roles that I think we need, and then we're looking at a fantastic game. So that was the good, the bad, and the ugly of Smite 2 first alpha weekend. It was a lot of fun. I am super optimistic about the game. I am super looking forward to it. I think Hi-Rez is doing a great job, and I think they're on the right track. I think it's awesome. Give it a go. Obviously, it's an alpha. There's a lot missing, and there's a lot of bugs. But you have to understand where this game is going to be in a year if Hi-Rez does the right things. I'm super excited. But that's all for me. There should be 2 videos on screen now. Give those a look. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I am a Pred player, but get used to seeing Smite on the channel now. Smite 2 is going to be huge. I'm excited for it. Let's keep the ball rolling. Bears out. Peace.